the mic on? Yeah, cool. We can hear me? Cool. Hey, thanks for an introduction. That was an easy job because you had two Davids in a row, so that's good. Hey, today I'm going to talk about why it's a good time to be a marketeer. I think every day is a good day to be a marketeer personally because I work in marketing for about 15 years now, but I think today is even better than ever. Cool, so before we look ahead and in today, let's look at back, right? And if you look at everybody that works in digital for the last 2 years, yeah, there were challenges with COVID, but we can also safely say it was the golden era for digital marketing and e-commerce because we finally saw a massive shift of consumers to digital. They were forced to. We saw organizationally companies invested heavily in digital because there was no other way, and the digital transformation finally became the digital acceleration that at least me personally as a marketeer was waiting for at least a decade, which resulted in a really high trajectory in a double-digit growth of e-commerce pretty much across all the markets. At least we've seen it for Nike, and I think a lot of other companies have seen the same. So if you worked in digital marketing and e-commerce for the last 2 years, and if your strategy was somewhat was somewhat on point, life was really fucking good, right? Like there was profits as well as revenue went up, and we were happy like the monkey that it was supposed to be a GIF and throwing money, but it's not, so my apologies. But if you look at fast forward to today, the situation is a little bit more gloomy than in the last 2 years, right? A lot of us have seen at least the demand numbers and the conversion struggling and not being at a high rate that we were used to. And that's impacted by a few factors. Like I want to call out 3, right? We've seen rising inflation that hit us all, pretty much double-digit across Europe, and that has a massive impact on purchasing power and disposable income of our consumers. Supply chain crunches continue for various reasons, whether there's still zero COVID policy in China, as well as different supply chain challenges such as high fuel costs that makes it really hard for especially big companies like Nike to forecast accurately the demand and supply, and that usually results in quite high stock and freight costs. And if you're a business owner right now, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or a small business, you are looking at your monthly, weekly, quarterly results and seeing, okay, we are on the brink of a recession. And what that usually means that our bosses, whether CEOs, CMOs, COOs, were saying, hey, we need to tighten the budgets. And that's something that marketing really doesn't want to hear. So by this point, you must ask yourself, but why is this guy saying there's a good time to be a marketeer? Well, personally, I believe marketing is always the front line of change. We are the first line of people in any organization, any company that has the close connection with the consumer. And since the last 3 factors have a big impact on consumers itself, it means that we, yet again, are on the front line to drive this change, to really ensure and help and be the partner of the business to sail through this turbulent time of recession. I always say it's easy to be a sailor when the seas are calm, and there is only a few people that actually know how to sail when there is a storm. And it's kind of a little bit of the same. I think this is the time to really show and separate companies that are great at marketing and companies that will struggle over the next couple of months. So I said, why marketing? It's because we own the relationship with the consumers. And if we go back and look at what's happening with the consumers today, right, there's 2 factors that are impacting the consumers. One is just their confidence in the economy itself, in house prices, costs, and what's going to happen in the world. But then secondly, purchasing power, right, which is connected with the high inflation. Purchasing power is going down. And if you work in retail and if you want to sell stuff to people, if people have less money to spend, that's a problem, right? So how do we tackle that? So I broke down like 4 types of consumer behavior that we see across the marketplace, right? And these are not consumer segments, these are not target audiences, these are psychological behaviors that will be present across different audiences, no matter in what industry are, right? So you have the first segment, slam on the brakes. These are your low-income demographics. These are the people that will be hit and impacted the most, and these are the people that will stop spending on a lot of not just luxuries, but a lot of like necessities. So they will scale down dramatically. Then you have the segment, which is the biggest segment, impacted but patient. This is your, so to say, middle class, right? They will scale down, especially on luxury purchases, but they're still quite optimistic about the future. So they'll continue to buy houses and big purchases, like big investments, but they'll probably spend less on holidays, restaurants, and so on. Then you have the most privileged target consumer, which is the comfortably well off. This is the top 5%, and they usually have enough in the bank or in assets that will smooth through the recession without really an impact. And then you have people like me, live for today, which is usually your younger urban demographics. They'll keep spending, that's the good news. Their disposable income might not be as high, but they'll keep spending, especially on travel, restaurants, clothes, and kind of like mid to low range retail. But what they will not do is maybe buy their first car, buy their first apartment, because they're a little bit uncertain right now, and they'll postpone that purchase for a few months or over a year, depending when it's going to be. So looking at those consumer behaviors, I kind of outlined 4 strategies that I believe that, you know, if a company follows, they'll be fine throughout these turbulent times, right? One is the seamless consumer experience. The second one is around loyalty. Third one, very important, don't be short-sighted and panic now. Look at it from the long perspective. And then lastly, walk the talk. So first, if we look at the seamless consumer experience, this shouldn't be anything new for anyone working in marketing or in digital platforms, right? But it's really important more than ever to have a unified consumer experience across all channels, both online and offline, if you're also in the physical retail business. And it starts with product or a service. It should always start with your best product or the best service that should be the hero delivered to the consumer, on the right channel with the right content. Again, like this is the time to relook at your content strategy and really be sharp in terms of what channels do we want to produce the content for, what's the objective of each content, and what's the next click. I think sometimes in marketing we produce a lot just for the sake of producing, but what's really the purpose and what's the next click? Is that the journey that brings the consumer on the path to conversion, but even more so important, as in the third bucket, how do you keep them active and engaged throughout the journey, right? It's more important in these times than ever to not just convert and be gone, but to ensuring to have a constant engagement with your consumers, because as I said at the beginning, conversion rates go down, so they might not convert, but it's still valuable to the business if they interact and engage with you. And through that interaction and engagement, build a sense of community. Really nurture those relationships with your most important customers, because in the end, they're the ones that will be with you through those tough times. And if you do that right, as you see in the middle, you'll eventually end up with deep engagement that will lead with more data, that will lead for you to do better personalization across the funnel. And that's like a cyclical process that you should run in terms of like ensuring that there is engagement that will lead to good data, better personalization, and so on. Lastly, some of you are in the DTC business. Nike is both present in the DTC landscape as well as wholesale. It's really important to ensure that your brand experience is the same whether you buy a pair of sneakers on Nike.com or on Zalando. It's really important to build those partnerships with your retailers and ensuring the level of service is the same. Because you know what? Consumers sees your brand, no matter where they buy them. So they expect the highest level of standards from you. Second one, loyalty. If times are tough, who comes to save you? Your best friends, right? And that's important that we nurture our best customers as our best friends, because they will be there for you after the crisis hits. And if we look at our kind of the way how we look at kind of creating marketing heat, right? You have the top of the funnel, creating demand, that's your brand awareness, brand building activities. And then the retained demand, so the ongoing conversation with the consumers that you build through content marketing and loyalty marketing. This should really be the priority in these times. Really focusing on how do you build an amazing loyalty program and engage and increase the frequency of purchase with your existing consumers. Because also cost-wise, it's going to be cheaper to re-engage existing consumers than to try to acquire new ones. And then an example how to drive really a personalized offer. I'm personally a big believer of really looking at audiences who is your audience and what is your segment. And that doesn't need to be shouldn't be one size fits all. We at Nike, for example, qualified 8 different personas, consumer segments, informed by data as well as consumer research. So ensuring that you know who your segments are. And next, what is the offer that you're going to give them? Because if I'm a football player or if I'm a runner, I care about really different things. And so does your consumer. So ensuring, what is the offer? Do you want exclusive products? Do you want cheaper product? Do you want early product? Do you want access to an athlete, for example? Do you want a VIP invitational event? Really ensuring, like, what is the offer that you're going to give to your consumers that matches with your business and will resonate and convert and engage well with your target audience. And then lastly, where do you deliver that offer? Right? A lot of people do loyalty marketing, think about email and SMS. I can tell you there is a lot of very creative ways to deliver offers to consumers that is not email. Because let's be honest, I check email, but when's the last time I've claimed an offer via email? I don't know. So really be creative and think about your influencers, affiliate partners, media partners, to really find creative ways to deliver your offers to your consumers. And that eventually will drive the desired outcome that you've outlined for the campaign, right? Whether it's brand awareness, conversion, demand. It can also just be a good share of voice and a social share and a social impression. Lastly, plan for the long run. This is my favorite one because it relates to the budget, and every time I'm when sales go down, I argue about budgets. And first of all, let's look at what kind of budgets, at least we at Nike, and I think a lot of big brands operate with, right? You have your performance marketing, your Google search, bottom of the funnel, activations, which literally the only purpose is to drive conversion and a low demand to spend. And then you have the fancy stuff, the brand building thing, right? The top of the funnel, what creates brand heat. Which is the more important one? Well, it depends who you ask. I personally believe they both need to work hand in hand. Because otherwise this happens. And I think we've all been in a situation where budget got cuts and nothing happened. And the CEO was like, oh, this is great. I can spend less on marketing and I still sell the same amount of stuff. Yeah, until there is a drop-off period. And it happens. It might be in a week, 2 weeks, might be in 2 months or 6 months. But it will eventually happen. That's why I personally believe there are 2 scenarios to weather this and manage this storm. One is the conservative scenario, because I do understand that at some point maybe you do need to flatten out your demand creation. Well, if you cannot afford to reinvest and grow your brand building, keep it flat, because the sales eventually won't hurt, or at least shouldn't, and reinvest after the crisis situation. But if you can, really future-proof your brand and keep both the performance and the brand building activities present and growing throughout this time, if you want to continue to grow the business in the same rate and pace that you've been growing in the past. And then lastly, walk the talk. And this is, a lot of companies ignore this part. I think it's probably more important than the other 3, although has a little bit less direct impact on the brand and on the business. But during COVID, we've seen a lot of companies investing a lot in sustainability, diversity. We've seen, huge investments around movements such as Pride, Black Lives Matter, which is great. But now, when the budgets are a little bit shaky, don't go away, because you're going to be called out for greenwashing or whatever washing you can be called. So really ensure that continue to be an inclusive brand that stands for equality and cares about the environment. I have 3 examples that I want to leave you with that I personally think are a good example. So first one is actually a Nike maternity line, right? So it's crazy to think that Nike, a brand that exists for 50 years, up until 2 years ago, didn't have a product line for pregnant women to do sport. And then how many pregnant women were actually consumers of Nike? I mean, it's crazy that you have a consumer group that's also represented amongst your employees and you don't serve them. So really ensure that your product assortment, your services, mirror who your consumer are. Secondly is just the representation, right? Like I love when I see an example, it's like, oh, we're a female-focused brand. What's your marketing department looking like? Well, it's 35 white dudes, middle-aged, and 1 girl. And it's like, oh, great. Yeah, but we have that 1 girl to understand the consumers. Well, that's bullshit. If your consumer group is diverse, your departments, your teams should represent that, because not only from a perspective of equality, but also diverse teams are more creative and they will tend to perform better. So it's really important, and I think there's a lot of companies that do that really, really well today, and it's really making me proud that Nike is one of these companies that has that high on the agenda. And lastly, sustainability. Hey, it's not about greenwashing. It's really about ensuring that you drive a sustainable business, and that doesn't necessarily always just means investing money to talk about how sustainable we are. Actually, on the contrary, there are a lot of companies doing really smart business models around e-commerce, about selling used product to consumers, about returns, repairs. So sustainability as well can be an additional and a new source of income for the business, not just something you need to see as an investment. And then lastly, I want to leave you with this thought. During this time, there's going to be a lot of screaming of discount, this and that. Like, be a brand that is interesting. Like, there is so easy to get lost in the clutter, so don't afraid to be creative and to be bold in everything you do. Because if more than ever, now is the time to stand out. And on the other hand, also be interested. Be interested in your consumers, because they care, they have valuable information to give you. Listen to their feedback. Improve based on their feedback. It's important, and I'll tell you one thing, a lot of brands don't listen. Really, a lot of brands don't care. So be a brand that is interested and does care, because consumers will pay you off in the long run. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was interesting, but ladies and gentlemen, do we maybe have questions? You can, this is your chance now. You can raise your hand, or of course, you can submit your questions on slide.do. The questions will appear on the screen, but until we have them ready, one question. So, would you say, since we're on e-commerce, and maybe this is a little bit out of left field, but Nike as a company, online sales versus in-store sales, what's the percentage, and how do now people act, especially maybe after COVID?
I think online sales represent roughly 35%.
35%?
If you include factory stores in terms of physical retail. If you take factory stores out, I think it's around 75% online.
Oh, nice. Because personally, I'm a big fan of Nike, and I think, especially now, and I see this within my community, when the COVID struck and everything, a lot of people went into sports, they started buying equipment and all stuff, so I don't know how this affected your business model, but...
I showed you the monkey with the money. Life was good. Life was good.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions? You can raise your hand. No? Everything is understood? Okay, also, what I wanted to mention is, so after each lecture, you can, and during the lecture, you can post the questions on the app. Just scan it on a QR code. We will answer, because of the time, top of 5 questions. But also, you can submit the questions on marketingmonkey.se, and then we'll answer your questions via email. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for David from Nike.
I guess my nod answered the question, right? No, we didn't. No.
Oh, we do have. Oh, wait.
Yeah, we can do more, yeah.
Okay.
We didn't cut budgets.
From Mrs. or Mr. Anonymous, did Nike cut budgets?
No, I've nodded during the applause, no, but not yet. But I think some of the things I've shown, let's see how the next couple of months will be, but I think the conservative scenario is probably quite realistic, but not cutting.
Okay. And the second question is, what 3 other channels you will recommend instead of email or SMS?
Oh, that's a good. Well, I think it depends a little bit on the business. I personally think there's a lot of opportunities in affiliates, whether they're social affiliates or web affiliates. So affiliates, I think, have a...
No, they're laughing at the questions. Oh, now everybody's typing. Okay, let's keep it going. We have nothing to do.
All right. All right. So, yeah, I would say affiliates. I think there's also a lot of creative things to do with social influencers other than just posting a photo of an outfit and a link. And then a partnership with emerging platforms. I think there's a lot obviously depending on the market, but for example, for us, there's a lot of interesting collaborations with like apps like Spotify, Calm, that kind of work in the wellness or music. If you do sport, there's a lot of music. So kind of brands that are not direct competitors, but can be interesting partners to do something together, which is less of a channel, because then you can pick your channel that's relevant, but it's more about like exploring partnerships with other brands that can complement each other.
So the question was, why Nike and not Adidas? I have to tell you, why Nike? They're entering in a total different phase. This, actually, they're Nikes. They're entering in the business now model, so... No, I'm joking, of course.
I mean, I think it's a personal preference. I personally just believe their product is not that well made, and it will wear off quicker, although it's a bit cheaper. That's my personal opinion, very like neutral.
What future is there for retail stores in your business?
I think retail stores are less of just destination for conversion. I think the way how high streets behave is becoming very different, especially post-COVID. I think the key unlock for brands that operate strongly digital and have a big retail footprint is how do you use retail stores as experience hubs for, I don't know, creative community? How do you create like event spaces so that it's not just, because it's expensive to have a store, you have to have it on good location. So how can you, on top of just selling, how can you make that space and offer it to your consumers and your community? Like we do a lot of creative workshops, athlete meet and greets, product customization, but also there is an idea of how can you just like, you know, renting a co-working space, and you can do it in a Nike store, why not? I mean, it is a space, it's well designed, it's quite spacious. So I think in that space where the store becomes more of an experience hub and a physical manifestation as a brand, as opposed to just a place where you come to try on a pair of trainers and buy them.
Okay, and we have a top channel for marketing. I think you just maybe, we answered that a little bit with the SMS question. Yeah. You've answered it, so we covered it. I think we need maybe a little bit more context on this one. So what do you prefer, being woke or being bold? I myself prefer being bold.
I think it shouldn't be a trade-off, to be honest. I think you should be bold. If you're a marketeer and if you want to do a good job, especially on the brand side of things, I think you have to have balls and be bold and make sometimes very provocative statement that will, you know, get the attention of the consumers. At the same time, you should be mindful about things that your consumers care. So I don't think it's a trade-off. I think you need to have the level of empathy as well as a level of balls to be bold.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll answer all of your questions via email, which we mentioned before. One more time, please give it up for David.
Thanks.